Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Saratoga podcast. This is Dan D. Federicis from Saratoga Report, and I'm here with Adam Israel. Adam, this is a continuation from our show from yesterday where we interviewed, I believe it was 3 candidates, and we're going to interview 2 more today, right?
Yeah, exactly. We have a candidate, Chris Mathiesen, on, who is running on the One Saratoga line to be our next mayor. He's a former commissioner of public safety. And we also have Gordon Boyd on, who's running on the Democratic line. It's democratically endorsed to be the next supervisor for Saratoga County. So, it's great. We're really lucky to have a lot of great candidates in the city and that they're willing to come on and share their thoughts.
And to be clear, we've invited each and every candidate for both city council as well as the 3 supervisor candidates. Most accepted our offer, some didn't. And we will also be broadcasting live on election day, roughly 9 o'clock. We'll figure out when we exactly start, but we will be bringing you live results from Saratoga, which specifically, essentially exclusively Saratoga, which none of the other media outlets do. So you got to sort of wait and hunt and peck to find Saratoga results. And that's all we're going to be talking about that evening. So that's going to be new for us, and it's fun. We hope you join us.
Yeah, yep. And real quick, Dan, we invited all candidates who are facing a challenger, right? So, like,
correct.
Gola, he's welcome to come on, but he's not facing a candidate, a challenger right now, so he's not on. And the other thing, just to talk about election night, we will be there in the room as results are getting read. So we will have the results before any of the other. I've been watching results now for a while. Nobody's there in real time at putting up the results that we will be. So anyway, stay tuned for that. But why don't we get into the interviews?
Excellent. I'm going to bring in mayoral candidate on the One Saratoga line, Chris Mathiesen. Chris was a dentist for about 4 decades in the city, as I understand. Chris,
yes, almost 45 years. Yes.
Okay, and you served 3 terms on the city council as commissioner of public safety. Is that correct?
I was commissioner of public safety from 2012 to 2017, when I chose not to run for a 4th term. And I also served on the Zoning Board of Appeals from 2000 through 2006. And I was chair in 2005 and 2006 of the ZBA.
Okay, great. So you're running for mayor here.
I am.
And we're going to get right into it here. For those that didn't see any of the other forums or anything, can you kind of introduce yourself to them and explain why you're running for mayor of Saratoga Springs on the independent one Saratoga line?
I can. Well, first of all, I'm on the independent one Saratoga line because we circulated petitions for One Saratoga, and we gained enough petitions so that we'll have a line, a row E on the ballot. I was also competing against Mayor Kim in the Democratic primary. I'm a lifelong Democrat, but I did lose that. I got about 40% of the vote, so I'm still on the ballot, and I think I have some, important perspectives on what's happening in the city, and I certainly have a really long history of having been here for nearly all my life. I've lived here since I was 3 years old. I went to local parochial schools. I chose to come back to Saratoga Springs to practice my profession and to raise my family. And so all these years later, I'm still here.
I got to ask you, because you clarified how you ran in the primary. Mayor Kim, on an interview just a couple of days ago on Channel 6, said, quote, I hope I'm quoting this correctly, he's the only real Democrat running for mayor. How would you respond to that?
Well, I'm the only lifelong Democrat running for mayor. So Mayor Kim, when we were both serving on the Zoning Board of Appeals, Mayor Kim at that time was a Republican. So I don't know what that means, that he's the only real Democrat running for mayor. That, again, I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, excellent. Adam, do you want to turn over to you?
Yeah, so you've been pretty critical of Mayor Kim. One of the big challenges that Saratoga facing right now is losing our insurance carrier. If elected mayor, what would you do to address that big hole right now that our city has?
Well, it's a big hole. First of all, I think I would reinstitute the position of risk and safety manager that we had enjoyed all those years with Marilyn Rivers. Marilyn Rivers did a great job, and she worked in concert with Travelers Insurance. Travelers Insurance and Marilyn Rivers saved the city many, many thousands of dollars because of their proactive stance and their proactive suggestions on how to deal with some of the problems the city was facing. At one point in time, every time you turn around, there was a lawsuit against the city, and the city was just settling. Maryland Rivers and Travelers Insurance came up with some important strategies so that they would be better able to defend those cases. Last year, when Mayor Kim, for reasons I still don't understand, was undermining the role of Maryland Rivers in city government and publicly criticizing the Travelers Insurance for the way they were handling a suit against the city by a former employee, and at the same time refusing initially to pay a $25,000 deductible that was required in that case. Many of us were saying, how is Travelers Insurance going to respond to that? And I guess the answer to that we found out earlier this month when Travelers decided that they would no longer be able to provide liability insurance for the city. Now, I understand that Mayor Kim insists that this is because of, and some other members of the council, in fairness, not just Mayor Kim, claims that this is because of lawsuits that were involving previous members of the council. If you read the letter, that's not what it says. It seems to indicate that Travelers was dropping the insurance coverage for the city because they disagree with the way the city is handling those kinds of issues going forward. And I think that's really the reason why they decided to end the coverage. And as a result, apparently, and I don't know exactly what the statistics would be, once a new carrier will be found, I've heard that the cost of insurance will be quite a bit higher than it has been. So yes, one of the things I would definitely do is reinstitute the risk and safety office. That's very important, and give them the authority that they used to have in city government, and try to reestablish a relationship not with Travelers, if not with Travelers, then with another reputable company. The problem is Travelers was one of the most reputable companies out there providing insurance for municipalities. So that's a big loss.
Chris, one of my disappointments in this, three-way mayoral campaign is because of Mayor Kim and, some what many will say were missteps that he's taken and mistakes and so forth, just like we talked about with this.
Yes.
And things in the past. We've been focused on the past and talking about being civil, which is important, but it seems like this campaign hasn't left any room to talk about the future. And I mean the campaigns overall, the election itself.
Yeah.
What would Mayor Mathiesen bring going forward? Something new and positive, and your vision, if you will.
Well, my vision for the city is not inconsistent with my vision for the city when I was on the council previously, and certainly a number of initiatives that were begun even during the Kim administration are not bad ideas at all. Certainly. The idea of connectivity throughout the city, the idea that people should have good, safe access to the city. If you're walking, if you're a pedestrian, or if you're on a bike, there are parts of the city, especially in the areas like where I live, off of Outer Grand Avenue, where that has never been the case. When we were finishing up the Geyser Road Trail, which did reach completion, I think the year after I was off the council. I was continually suggesting that once that's done, we need to look at other parts of the city, especially the Outer West Side, to see what we could do in order to provide the same kind of safe access that we have now provided for the people off of Geyser Road, Geyser Crest, and some other neighborhoods out there. The quality of life is much better. It's a quality of life issue here too. It's safety and quality of life, and we have something now that we didn't have when I was on the council. We have the infrastructure funds from the federal government that will help us to fund those kinds of programs. So I applaud the current administration for their efforts to look into this, and I would certainly continue with that. That's one issue. I would definitely not drop the ball on connectivity. I think short-term rentals are a really big problem in the city. I think that they are having a negative impact on neighborhood character in a large area of our city, a lot of the residential neighborhoods of our city.
So what would you do to address that?
Okay, so so what I would do, I've talked about this when I was talking about this when I was commissioner. People came to me back in 2015 or 16, I think, and we're complaining about what was happening to their neighborhoods. Well, it's gotten much, much worse. People have been buying up these properties. I think that this is a zoning issue. I think this is a commercial use in a residential area. We have very specific uses that are allowed in residential areas, but we don't have a really good definition of what residential use is. I think we need to go back to the zoning codes and better define what residential use is, because residential use certainly is in buying a housing unit in a neighborhood and basically turning it into a mini motel. When you do that and there's nobody actually residing in that building, in that house, then that's not a residential use. That's a commercial use in a residential zone, and it shouldn't be allowed. And I think in UR1, UR2, UR3, SR1, SR2, and rural residential, I really think that we should be restricting those uses to just merely residential uses, not a commercial use like that. There are other parts of the city, some of the transect zones, so they're not called transect anymore, but there's some of the transect zones, some of the other more commercial districts towards the core of the city probably wouldn't have the negative impacts from short-term rentals. But neighborhoods like mine are definitely impacted by this kind of thing, and on so many different levels. In a neighborhood where people are always looking out for each other or things of that sort, where everybody pretty much knows vaguely, at least vaguely, who people are, all of a sudden a home is replaced with a commercial use like that. It just undermines that character, and it undermines that sense of stability and that sense of safety in a neighborhood. And imagine what the impacts are on the properties that are immediately adjacent to a short-term rental. People who have invested all their funds in their house, and suddenly they look at their house and they realize that it's worth less than it used to be if they were to sell it, because someone bought a house next to them and they're using it just as a short-term rental. It's not something that people would prefer to live next to that. So I think we need to protect our residents. I think we need to protect our residential character. And in Saratoga Springs, I think that over the years we've done a great job with our downtown, but some of the things that affect quality of life for our residents have been put on the back burner. And those are the kinds of things that I would focus on. The other issue with short-term rentals is we want families to move into Saratoga Springs. Well, if people are paying these exorbitant prices to buy these houses up and do this really actually run these very profitable businesses, that means that there are fewer houses that are available for a family to try to be able to live in Saratoga Springs. And that drives up the cost. There's more competition for those units. That's not a good thing for the city. So on all those counts, I think we need to look at ways of keeping short-term rentals out of parts of the city. Maybe give people who already have those short-term rentals a period of time for them to unload them and maybe turn them into long-term rentals or sell them outright. But short-term rentals are not a good idea.
Do you agree? The city recently transformed a property on Adelphi Street into a low-barrier homeless shelter. Is that something you agree with? Do you have a plan to tackle or address the homelessness situation that Saratoga is facing?
So the shelter on Adelphi Street, we owe so much to Sonny Bonaccio and Julie Bonaccio and Meg Kelly for all the work that they did to make sure that came to pass. Up until that point, the city didn't really have a good solution. If you recall, the mayor was pushing to use the former senior center on William Street for a low barrier shelter. And there was an uproar from the people from the adjacent properties, including the Saratoga Central Catholic community, because their campus was immediately adjacent to that property. And parents of kids there were concerned about their well-being, their safety. Well, sadly, in the Climate Union, Mayor Kim mocked them and questioned their Catholic values. And he mocked Shelters of Saratoga because they were looking at that and saying it was really over their heads. It was too much for them to handle, because it is a very big responsibility to take care of a group of people in a low barrier shelter. It's very different than from some other types of shelters, like Shelters of Saratoga runs, which is restricted and does have some very specific guidelines that people have to follow. They do a great job for the city, but they didn't deserve to be mocked by the mayor. As far as the facility on the Delphi Street is concerned, I think it's a great short-term solution. But I think we all need to put our heads together to decide what a long-term solution is. And the first step, I think, is to get a really good handle on who the people are that we're serving and where they came from and what what the city's responsibility is there, as opposed to the federal government and the state government and the county. I think that expecting Saratoga Springs to fund a low barrier shelter, I think is asking a lot. When we have so many other really important things, we shouldn't be funding that solely. I think we need to find we need to have a very altruistic approach here. We need to be understanding of the fact that these are people who have some terrible problems. They're not making good choices for themselves. There are mental illness issues here. There is alcohol and drug addictions here. I unfortunately have had experience with family members of this sort, and I have an understanding of how they end up in the street, because families kind of give up and their friends give up on them. It's a very, very sad thing. But I think that we need to get a really good assessment on how best to deal with this problem. It certainly wasn't, I think, a good idea to allow people to live in the parking garage. I don't understand why the trespassing laws weren't being enforced. I don't understand why the open container laws were being enforced, et cetera, et cetera. I think that was a big mistake. I would think we lost a lot of people this summer who were exposed to that, and last summer who were exposed to that scene. I think came away with a negative impression of Saratoga Springs. I think that's a very bad thing. I think that you need to have standards. You need to enforce your rules and your laws. And when you stop doing that, you're basically enabling people who have these issues to continue to operate the way they were.
This council is full of strong personalities. 3 of them are returning no matter what, right?
Yes.
And predict or promise or what you will, how would a Mayor Mathiesen get along with a city council that has been at odds? And it's not just about Commissioner Montanino. There have been some early ugly interactions early in the term involving Commissioner Moran and the mayor. Tell us, how would Mayor Mathiesen handle the interactions with his fellow council members?
I think the mayor needs to be a facilitator. In the past, mayors have been facilitators to improve relations among people in the council. That didn't happen over the past nearly 2 years. There was almost an encouragement for some of the vitriol that we saw. I've attended a lot of meetings, and you pick up a lot of what's going on, a lot of the emotion that's going on when you're actually in person, as opposed to watching through video or recordings. It's really unfortunate. I never quite have seen anything quite like this. The mayor needs to make sure that certainly in public, that the members of the council conduct themselves when they're dealing with each other in a respectful manner, and that wasn't happening. And the last city council meeting was another example of that. But there are countless other examples that have taken place. In the 6 years that I was in the council, or the years in the past, there have been some emotions that were expressed, and maybe sometimes were not expressed in the best manner. But not to this extreme. I've never seen anything quite like this. Part of the problem may be the fact that so many of the members of the council are new, other than Mayor Kim, who did serve for 4 years in the council. Everyone else is new to this, and maybe they don't have an understanding of how important it is that they conduct themselves in a respectful manner. They're role models in the community, and they really need to be very careful of how they express themselves. In the past, also, we used the pre-agenda meetings in order to make sure that everyone was on board, everyone understood what was being presented during city council meetings, that if there were any questions or any issues that they wanted to discuss, they were discussed during the pre-agenda meetings, so that some of the negative comments, some of the reactions of council members that we've seen over the past nearly 2 years wouldn't be taking place, because a lot of that would have been sorted out before the actual council meeting was taking place. So I think that utilizing the pre-agenda meetings properly is important. And I think that the mayor certainly can go behind the scenes and speak to council members individually about these matters and about their conduct.
Excellent. Adam, do you want to have anything else before we wind it down?
Yeah, I've one last question, and this has to do with your time as when you were Commissioner of Public Safety.
Yeah.
That's when, unfortunately, Daryl Mount passed away.
Yes.
You took a lot of criticism for that, for not doing an internal investigation. I think there was just the city was just found not liable for causing his death. The Daily Gazette wrote that, and what's interesting is this article has since been taken down from the Gazette, which is a whole tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, but you can still find it in the search engine that the verdict showed that BLM has favored arguments over facts. So do you feel somewhat vindicated in this finding that your police department at the time acted appropriately in that scenario and interaction with Mr. Mount?
Yeah, I feel that, first of all, there's justice here for Greg Veach and for the police officers that night, and for the investigators who did the follow-up investigation, did a very thorough follow-up investigation. Had they not done a thorough follow-up investigation, we would never have been successful in that trial. Of course, the evidence that was presented was based on the investigations that our investigators did, and it was the reason that we did a much broader investigation than just the criminal investigation of the assault on Daryl's girlfriend, was because the day after this incident took place, a blogger at the time, John Teig, released a blog that said basically 3 men go into an alley, 2 cops and a civilian, and the 2 cops come out. What happened to the civilian? He was insinuating right away that the police must have done something wrong, and that just set off a lot of problems. And he organized some of the protests, et cetera, and it was a mess. In terms of internal investigation, an internal investigation is not an investigation into the incident. It's a separate investigation into wrongdoing on the part of one of the police officers. And in order to initiate an internal investigation, you would have someone, either the victim or a witness, basically complain about wrongdoing on the part of an officer. Well, the only person who complained about wrongdoing on the part of the officers was Daryl Mount's girlfriend, who insisted that she wasn't hit and that the police just came up on Daryl to attempting to quote unquote beat him up or whatever. The surveillance cameras, again, which Maryland Rivers and Travelers Insurance Company insisted that we should have, were already in place at that point in time. It was before we had body cameras, before anybody had body cameras, but the surveillance cameras were in place, and they showed exactly what happened that night and showed that the person who complained that Daryl hadn't his girlfriend was not being truthful. And so there was no instance there where we were going to institute an internal investigation. And everything else that happened, we don't know what happened exactly. It's always been the assumption that he must have fallen off the scaffolding, but nobody will ever know. But we do know from the broader investigation that the police talked to countless individuals who were living in the apartments near overlooking that alley. Everything that they heard was consistent with the idea that he must have fallen and that the police found him that way. And absolutely nothing was consistent at all with the idea that he was beaten up by the police. And so based on all the information that they had, and, this all took place between 3:02 and 3:08 a.m. when the police, called the fire EMS department to come and help render medical care. It's just hard to imagine how any other story here would be at all credible. So yes, yes, I'm not really concerned about my reputation here. I'm concerned about the reputation of those cops. They didn't deserve that. And I think, again, when you start to question police and you start to make these accusations, you're undermining public safety. That's not a good thing. It really isn't. It's very important that the people have faith in our police department. It's a great department, and people who are in that department are very carefully screened before they ever get into the department. And there's no tolerance for the kind of behavior that people were insinuating that the police were engaged in.
All right.
Last comments before we let you go for voters?
Last comment. Tonight is the League of Women Voters debate, and so the 3 of us will be going up against each other. So I'm hoping that lots of people will watch that. I think the more people who pay attention to this race and to these issues, the better I'll do. So we'll see how it goes.
And you can watch that live, folks. You got to register ahead of time. The League of Women, Saratoga League of Women Voters. Just Google it, and you can register. And there's not much. The registration involves sending in your email address, basically. It takes 10 seconds.
Vote with Saratoga, right? Yeah.
So folks, be informed. Watch it tonight. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you for both of you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Yeah,
excellent.
Well, we appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Okay, we're running a little behind. We have a second guest with us today. Gordon Boyd is running for supervisor, which is a county position, but it represents the city of Saratoga Springs. If you're like me and you grew up in a county with a county legislature, the Board of Supervisors is our version of the county legislature. In fact, most counties did have boards of supervisors before some of them changed over the years to county legislatures. Gordon Boyd, welcome here. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. And real quick, Gordon, I've gotten to know your son and your grandson. They play soccer together. I think we want to start out with just expressing our condolences. Your wife recently passed away, so first, our condolences for your loss.
Thank you, Adam.
You're welcome. All right, Dan. Sorry.
Absolutely, and I concur.
Right, now on to
yeah, and Gordon and I spoke on the phone the other day about that. Gordon, on the campaign here, supervisor to me is sort of like one of those under the radar positions because some people don't quite understand what it is. It's not part of the city council, even though they do attend and give a report. But you've come up with some outside the box ideas, or at least ideas in areas that other people aren't talking about. You were instrumental in helping the backstretch workers kick off a labor organizing. You proposed some CDTA to help with the school busing because there's such a school bus shortage, and I personally was affected by that. You're talking about the weighted voting at the committee level of the county legislature, which is sort of inside the baseball stuff, but you pointed out how important that is. So I commend you for bringing up some issues that others maybe haven't brought up before. Do you want to respond to that at all?
Well, I've been a student of county government for 45, 50 years. I covered Saratoga County for the Daily Gazette when it was called the Schenectady Gazette back in the early 70s. And after when I worked for the state legislature in the 70s and the 80s, I worked for the Speaker of the Assembly, and I got involved with many issues that affected local governments throughout the state, holding hearings, making policy, drafting and negotiating legislation with my Republican counterparts in the state Senate. So I learned about county government that way. And then as an energy consultant from the late 90s until about 7 years ago, I managed energy procurement for 37 of the county governments in New York State. And so I learned about, well, I was their expert in procurement for electricity, natural gas, and renewable energy. So my acquaintance with county government decision-making processes, the different forms of county government that we have in New York State, has given me a familiarity with that. And I will say that Saratoga County, the population and the growth of the county over the decades that I've lived here has really outgrown the form of government that we have, the Board of Supervisors. We're the largest county in the state that still has that form of government. The next largest one is about half of our size. And the ones smaller than that are almost as small as our larger towns that still have supervisory forms of government. Most counties of our type, which have a metropolitan center and larger towns, commuters, and lots of development, are using the legislative format to have equal representation among the members of the board. And that's something we don't have in Saratoga County. We have 2 members from Saratoga Springs who divide 28,000 weighted votes when the board meets as a full body. But they only hold 6 positions on the committees, which nothing gets to the full board without coming out of a committee. And on the committees, it's 1 supervisor, 1 vote. So then Matt Veach's vote is equal to the supervisor of the town of Day, who has 819 people. And I just think that's bound to result in inadequate outcomes for us. I have ideas on transportation, housing, workforce housing, especially to advance in the county as a whole. And I just think it's going to be hard to get to those outcomes if we don't have a representative structure on the Board of Supervisors. I will propose rules changes to the board if I'm elected, and that would at least correct what we can of the inequity of the committee structure and see where we go from there.
So Gordon, the question I would have is, one thing we've seen about government politicians is they're normally very unwilling to give away power. And as a Democrat, you would need a lot of Republican support to pass something like that. So
Right.
I think that was already would be difficult to do. Now you're doing it with people who aren't necessarily in your party or caucus with you. How would you see yourself effectively impacting these changes?
Well, Adam, the common interest here is among the larger population towns. So Saratoga Springs, Wilton, Moreau, Milton, Malta, Clifton Park, and Half Moon are all above the mean of the town population average. Okay, so those towns actually have the same interest. The citizens of those towns are being disenfranchised by this system just as much as Saratoga Springs is. It's just that the political differences get mediated by the Republican Party. But those towns do have an interest. And I would say also that during the pandemic, this came up and it was resolved in a very, impactful way. The small towns and the larger towns ran up against each other over the conduct of the county administrator and the way he was allocating overtime to certain workers. And they got rid of the county administrator. The big towns coalesced, and even Tara Gaston, who was the lone Democrat from Saratoga Springs, became very briefly the chair of the health committee. So that was coalition building even then, before I started talking about it in this campaign. So I think it's possible because they have an interest in it. And I think if it can be proposed in such a way that brings us together in a way that's equitable and fair to everybody, I think it would be a hard thing for them to vote against.
We jumped right into some issues here, and I'm glad we did because I'm enjoying this conversation. But if we could back it up a little bit, can you kind of give us I did not see the League of Women Voters event from the other night yet. Can you kind of give us your opening statement, if you will? Why are you running? It's a three-way race with two positions open, so people can vote for up to two. Can you kind of give us your intro remarks?
Well, as I was just alluding to in response to your first question, I think there are some challenging issues that Saratoga County faces that have really come to the fore, but the county government has just, because it's run by town supervisors whose political future is really dependent on the way they run their towns, the county government kind of floats under the radar, as you suggested, Dan. We have issues with transportation. We could use a lot more public transportation to get people where they're going and to make the housing that people can afford more accessible to the jobs they can get. Our housing situation is really out of control. I listened to what Chris Mathiesen said a few minutes ago, and I completely agree with his position on short-term rentals. They've been driving up the price of housing, the cost of rental property, and it's driving our workforce out of the county. Whenever I go to a medical checkup, I ask the nurse, where do you live? And the last four were Greenwich, Whitehall, an RV in Lake George, and a gal at radiation at Saratoga Hospital who had moved to Glens Falls, took a job at the hospital there because the rent she can afford in Glens Falls puts her within walking distance of her job. She couldn't do that in Saratoga Springs. So we need to expand the supply of housing. We need to be more flexible in our zoning codes about accessory dwelling units, adding garage apartments and that sort of thing. I would like to see the county take a broader position on issues like that and to give people in the towns as well as in Saratoga Springs the opportunity to invest in more housing supply. I think we need a reentry program for people coming out of incarceration. I was a religious volunteer at Mount McGregor Prison for 7 years. I have kept up with a number of the men that I met during that time, and I'm very familiar with the challenges that people face when they're coming home from time in jail. So I think we need to put the county in the lead of coordinating our nonprofits, our faith communities, our recovery programs to keep people from going back to jail at the cost of $70,000 per year per person, and to keep the rest of us safer and to do the right thing for the people that are coming out. So those are, the ways that I'm approaching the issues. I think these are issues that beyond partisanship ought to be in the interest of every supervisor on that board to address, because they affect the whole county. So that's the approach I'm taking. I will be representing the people of Saratoga Springs, not the city government, but per se, but the people of Saratoga Springs and their interests, at which we're part of a larger community in our section of the county.
Many people have implied or said that the county needs to do a better, bigger job in helping Saratoga address our homelessness issue and our homelessness population. Is this something you agree with? And do you have a plan if you were the next supervisor of what you would do to get more funding from the county to help Saratoga with its homelessness issue?
Yes, I totally agree with that. In fact, it's the social services district is Saratoga County. Under the state constitution, the county has the responsibility for caring for the indigent, broadly defined. That includes street homeless, all of the others that we sort of broadly put into that category. The way they do so is by working with the nonprofit agencies like RISE and Shelters of Saratoga, AIM, Captain, Veterans and Community Housing Coalition, a whole bunch of others that actually provide the services. And then through various state programs that the county administers, they get reimbursed by the county for the expense of their care for these individuals. What the city has done is really a little bit, it's salutary in the sense that they've tried to get a place where services could be rendered, but it's not their job to actually render the services. So I'm very happy that RISE has been brought into the picture at the Adelphi Street location. And I hope that relationship continues for a long time, and that through RISE we'll be able to find a permanent location. But it is the county's responsibility to fund this, and the state money is there to fund it. I found out when I was volunteering in this area a few years ago, working on developing a project for my church, that the county was giving Shelters of Saratoga about half the money per capita that every other county in the region was giving to their cold weather emergency service provider. Albany was $75, Warren County was $85, Washington County was $80, and Shelters of Saratoga County was giving them $35. So that's one of the reasons in the background why the location of the cold weather service at Cold Blue has been such a chronic crisis, because shelters have been operating on a shoestring, and the county has not been giving them the money that they should get. And every single dollar of that is state money. There's no local match. So it's 100% state money. Whatever shelters agreed to with the county would get 100% of that money from the state, whether it was $35, $65, or $85. I just think it was negligent of the county and lack of attention by our then supervisors to really see that program was properly funded.
The way this election is structured is you're running against two opponents to get two out of three. The top two will win. So you're running against them, but if you win, you're going to be serving with one of them, Matt Beach or Michelle Madigan. We talked a little bit about this dynamic to both of them yesterday. Do you have a preference on that? Can you work with both of them if you're both there for the benefit of the city? What's the you on that issue?
I think that's up to the voters. Matt has been in office for 16 years. He's a Republican. He happens to be a good friend of mine, and I have great admiration for him as a person. We have some differences over politics, but I mean, he's a pretty practical person, as I try to be. Michelle Madigan came back to the Democratic Party earlier this year so she could circulate petitions and get on the ballot. Now she's been discovered to have not filed her financial, reports on time. And I really think that the voters of Saratoga Springs are unlikely to empower a candidate who's really kind of a scofflaw when it comes to the election law. Election law is there to protect our democracy. And if people are going to just blithely shunt it aside, they're really being like a lot of people we hear about every day in Washington who are election deniers and that sort of thing. I think that would be unfortunate. But if the voters see fit to put her in office, and me as well, I'll do everything I can to work with her to make sure that the city is adequately represented.
And I don't necessarily want to defend her on that. It's breaking news, about a day and a half old, at least to me. And she has to answer for that to the voters who might vote her. But in fairness to her, Mayor Kim had a similar issue 2 years ago when he got into office. Is that correct? As I did some research on that.
I'm not familiar with what Mr. Kim's problem was, but I know that in Michelle's case, her treasurer resigned in March, and then she only got somebody back in the swim a week or so ago. That's 6.5 months without a treasurer while she was raising and spending money. That's a violation of the election law.
Fair enough. Okay. Adam, do you have any follow-up for Gordon Boyd?
No, just I appreciate you coming on. I know it was sometimes our politics might not all align, but we're all Saratogians. I know you've gone back and you've had business dealings with my family for years ago, and so I think we're all in this for the best of the city. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us your vision if you were the next supervisor.
Well, thank you very much. I applaud what you're doing here to bring shed some light on the political contests that are underway. I think that's a good thing. The whole practice of journalism has been changing over the last number of years as digital technology has taken over, and the paper is well, it's not out of business yet, but it's definitely not the only way that we get our news. So I think what you're doing is really commendable, and I appreciate the opportunity to be part of it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
All right. Thank
you. Okay. Excellent, Gordon. We're going to take you off screen now, and Adam and I will say our final goodbyes. Thank you again for joining us. Okay, Adam. That was good. This was, like I said, this was an extension of yesterday's show in effect. Thanks for being here with me. And we will follow up. This will be posted.
Yeah,
it's live now, but it'll be available.
Yeah, it was great. I was really happy to see. I think the only two candidates to not come on were Mayor Kim and Kristen Dart. I wish they would have, because they saw how. I think our interview with Mr. Boyd was an example of how we really do this as a service to the city and not as a way to push our political agendas. Although we will give our opinions sometimes. Yes. We certainly will do that. But at the end of the day, I think the informed voter is the best voter. And so that's what we're trying to do here. But Dan, I appreciate it. I think the early voting starts Saturday.
That's correct. Yes, it does. And shame on us. We should have had a list of dates, but certainly on the County Board of Elections website and elsewhere.
And then, so November 7th is the election night. So that's a week from next Tuesday. Just 10 days away. We'll be live then. And so we encourage everybody to spread the word. If people want to learn about candidates, send them the link to our show, and we will see you next week.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll be back next Wednesday. It'll be 6 days before the election. Things will be heated up. Something tells me we'll have something to talk about by then.
That's right. Stay charming, Saratoga.
Thanks for watching, folks.